We're going to be coming right out of Mad Max kind of stuff today with a tutorial on making this piece of belly armor that I created for a costume shoot that I was making. Hi everyone. So as I said in the intro, we're going to be working on making this sort of post-apocalyptic belly armor piece. And this is a close-up picture of what it looks like. All right. You can see that it looks like it's old. We have various areas where there's staining and there's cuts in it. And again, it's a little bit hard to see. I'll flip it around again here, and we'll see a little bit more. You can see all along this edge how it's rough. And this was brand new pieces of leather. All this leather was brand new. So today we're going to figure out we're going to take new leather and make it look old. And in part of understanding that, you have to kind of understand what old leather looks like. And we're also dealing with two things. We're dealing with weathering or aging, making leather look old. And then we're also dealing with weathering and distressing, where you're then showing further damage to the leather, either in terms of just the natural use of the item, but also the post-apocalyptic or the in-use things that you're going to have. So that you're going to have areas that are going to abrade or rub on one another because of that daily use, or because they're going to rub against another item. So when you're building out your whole build, you will want to give some consideration to how those parts overlap. In some cases, if you're doing a build for a LARP like Dystopia Rising, or even just regular LARPs, that'll occur naturally. But in some cases, we want to speed up that process so that we can take something that looks brand new and pale and like this, and then get it to look a little bit more aged like this. Part of that's the dyeing process. Part of that is some distressing that we'll do at the beginning, and part of it's just some technique and kind of just figuring some stuff out. So one of the most important things to do when you're doing this is to consider that you have enough space to work in what you're doing. This has belts which are going to be really, really long, which we'll cover in another segment. So you're going to want to have enough room to at least spread out most of the belt so you can do the dyeing process. And then even this piece here is going to be 18 inches long, so you want to make sure that you have enough room for that. Tools, I do want to just show one piece, and here's a great example of a old piece of leather. Okay, this is a piece of military gear. It holds pliers. It's an electrician's set. This leather was not finished. It was not dyed. It became that color. It used to look like this color, or one version of that color. But through aging and patina, it gets darker and darker and darker. Okay, at least some of the ones I've seen are that way. And if you look very closely at this, okay, you can see that there is some degree of patina on the edges. See how it's dark on these edges? That is a critical part to try to capture. Okay, this is from grease and dirt that collects on the edges as it rubs on stuff. You can see that this part here is a little bit darker than the rest of this. Okay, if we take that off, you can kind of see the difference. That's also because that part rubs on stuff. So a key component to weathering and aging leather is making sure that the item is actually just kind of looking at old stuff and other belts and things to see where there's damage. If you look very closely, you can see there's a couple little marks right here, and that is from when the person pulls that open using their fingernail, kind of hits there. So all those little things help to create that look. All right, and that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about as we go along and do the tutorial. Tools. In the post-apocalyptic world, tools are very important. But in this case, we're going to be making it in our world, which frankly today isn't too post-apocalyptic. But we'll talk about the tools you need to make that really cool belly armor piece that we talked about. Okay, check it out. So one of the first things we need to address is the tools that you need. So of course you're going to need some vegetable tan leather, will be ideal. The reason is because we can dye this ourselves. It can be molded, and some of the things that we can do to it will take a better effect than we could do with a chrome tanned leather that's already kind of got the dye in it. It'll still work. It's just we can have far more control over that in this case. So some other things that we are going to need, of course, are paper towels, great for applying and blending dyes. Um, these are great little tools here. These are just simple wood, cheapo wood chisels. Um, and the whole point is that they've got these, well, points that will help us gouge into the leather to help with that effect. These are not traditional leatherworking tools. Rather, these are woodworking tools that we're repurposing for another use. So each has a slightly different kind of tip, and we can use those to great effect. A pair of scissors or shears is going to be ideal for adding some additional effects that are critical. You're going to need some sort of mallet. This will help to, again, we're going to kind of punish this leather a little bit, and this is one of the key things, is applying some force on there. I have this great little stamp. It's a craft tool tooling stamp. The number is... I can barely read that number because I am old. 294. Okay, it's a B294. So, and I'll put a note in the comments as to what the specific one that you're going to need. Sanding materials. This is a sanding block, but other sanding materials will be good too. And then, of course, dyes. So I'm using Tandy's. Actually, this is a Fenice product as well. Water stain. You could also use the Echo Water Flow. And Feebings would work too. I like these because these are truly water-based and allows me to blend as I work along. And then, of course, there's some other things that you might need as well. As you're progressing, you'll find that there's various things you can use to sort of make impressions in the leather. Most important tool is you need a cutting tool. Okay, I use these fairly inexpensive utility knives with the snappable blades so that I can make sure my blade's super sharp when I need it to be. And that's part of what we'll use. And then a hole punch is often ideal. We'll definitely be needing this when we get to the part where we are using it for the belt. A good work surface. So this is a cutting board that I can cut directly on. Something like this is great for punching as needed so that you don't damage stuff. This is okay, but I prefer having that to absorb the material. Also, a little tray with the different paints and dyes. I use Q-tips a lot because it helps me get into very, very small areas. And I can be very small and specific in my dyeing and movements. So that's critical. So today we learned a little bit of an introduction about the tools that you'll need for the project. And as we'll see going forward in the next section where we talk about weathering and we talk about distressing, you'll see that how all kinds of various tools can be used. And it really comes down to finding stuff just laying around. It's amazing the kind of work and the kind of things that you can do with what you just have laying around. As you saw in the introduction, we used pretty simple tools, nothing too spectacularly, fantastically weird, at least not weird in terms of expensive stuff. A lot of those items you can get for cheap at Harbor Freight and a lot of other places. And it's always been my intention to try to do things as easily as possible. Not entirely because I'm lazy, but in part because sometimes we get hung up on having all the perfect tools when in reality we just need to get started and start doing some stuff. So next segment, we're going to start using those tools and we're going to, do some damage.